Tell me something.
Tell me something. Have you ever felt, experienced, or thought outside of the now? Do you think you will ever be able to do it? Maybe you can say, sure, you have accomplished many things in the past, and you can accomplish many things in the future. But think of it this way. Nothing has really happened in the past. It happened in the now. And nothing will happen in the future. It will also happen in the now. I must admit that this message sounded strange to me the first time I heard it, especially because its author sometimes refers to spiritual topics that are far from my understanding. But anyway, it has a very valuable message that didn't go unnoticed, and I hope to be able to transmit it. Next, let's look at it with the 7 best ideas from the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Remember, if you want to keep learning life-enhancing skills, subscribe to his channel. First idea, what is real and what is not real? For Tolle, the real would be the present moment. The not real would be what is not that moment. That is time, the past, and the future, which only exists in our mind. Consequently, he starts from the premise that all we have is the now. As we have said before, nothing has happened in the past and nothing will happen in the future. It all happened in the now. The past and future can only be accessed through thinking. Furthermore, even thoughts can only exist in the now. A little clarification here for those of us who are overly rational and logical people. Before we get into it, let's preface this by saying that Tolle doesn't at any point deny the usefulness of remembering the past and planning for the future in order to act accordingly and achieve goals. He simply approaches it from a different perspective than we are used to. Then it becomes clear that, according to Tolle, the only thing that exists is the now, and therefore that is the only place we can really be. What he calls being aware. And what does this mean? It's very simple. I think we all know that person who gets lost in the past and the future, and spends a lot of time stuck there. He says things like how good he was before the crisis, or that he will be really happy when he achieves something, like a better job, a raise in salary, a couple, etc. Be that as it may, the point is that your thinking takes you to a place that doesn't exist, to a place outside of time. Therefore, if you are thinking, you are not in the present. But don't worry, no one says you can't think. But let's say that to be in the present you must pay full attention to the things that are happening around you right now. It's more about feeling than thinking. For example, listening carefully to the person next to you, the song of a bird, savoring a meal, feeling an emotion, observing a thought. Focusing your attention on feeling some part of your body. At this point, I thought all this was very nice, but I also wondered what practical sense the power of the now has in our lives. As it turns out, it does make a lot of sense. But it is still a bit early to answer this question. Let's look at some more concepts and then we'll come back here. Second idea, the identity of being. For now we have talked about what is real and what is not. Let's talk now about identity. You may feel identified with the way you think about your neighborhood, your city, your country, your possessions, your family, and so on. The author tells us that our real identity cannot be found in any of these things. That is the identity of our mind, of our ego, which needs the past and the future to be happy. If you don't believe it or doubt it, think about this. What would be your identity? Or rather, the identity of your ego, if you were born in a country completely different from yours and with a different family. I think we can all agree that your being, as a physical body, wouldn't have changed, but your perception of your identity would identify you with another neighborhood, another city, other possessions, another family, and so on. The identity to which Tolle directs us is, then, that identity that comes from the self and not from the mind. This may sound a bit abstract, but just focus on the fact that the identity of the self, your real identity, does not change regardless of where you were born, and what your life experience has led you to think. In short, we have to distinguish two identities, the real one, and the mental or egoic one. Now it comes the interesting part. As long as the egoic mind leads, you can only be well in brief moments, which is when the ego gets what it wants. That will last more or less. But after that time, that well-being fades away and the ego will need to look for something new to feel good again. All this sounds familiar, doesn't it? For example, we can spend 2 years waiting for a raise, and when we finally get it, it won't be long before we're waiting for the next raise. The concept of identifying with the self somehow frees us from waiting to get that raise in order to feel good. Put another way, if you're not happy with what you have, you won't be happy with what it will come to come, no matter how good it is. Third idea. Clock time and psychological time. We have already seen that this is not about not using time, past and future. In fact, it is very necessary in practical matters. However, so as not to fall into the trap of believing that the past and future exist, the author differentiates between clock time and psychological time. Clock time is the time you use when you make a mistake, you learn and act accordingly, or when you work on a goal and you know where you want to go but you put your attention on the step you are on now. It's the clock time. The past and the future is the means, and the now is the end. It is, on the other hand, when you are mortified by a past mistake instead of learning from it, or if you become so obsessed with a goal, perhaps because you believe it will make you happy, that the step you have to take now becomes a means without intrinsic value to achieve the end. Then you live for that future that doesn't exist. Your mental or egoic identity directs you. So how do you stop identifying yourself with the mind? Well, the key is to end the deception of time. I sometimes get lost with the vocabulary Tolle uses, but basically what he means by this is that we stop living exclusively in memory and anticipation. Or as we saw in the previous example, that we do not constantly think about that pay raise. If we continue with the example from before, whenever it is not necessary, we can take our attention away from the past and future to bring our attention to the present. In fact, this is a technique we can use to relax when we feel uneasy. If you catch yourself with a negative emotion, thinking that you haven't yet been given that raise, and the key word here is catch, you have taken a first step because you have come back to the present. You have become what he calls the silent observer. Fourth idea. The silent observer. When you can observe your mind, that is, become aware of emotion, you become identified with your real identity. At this point, you are a kind of spectator paying attention to an emotion caused by a thought that your mind has created. You can also look at it this way. Emotion is the body's reaction to thoughts. The next step is to pay as much interest to your reactions as you do to the person or situation that caused them. Then, stop judging, look at the thought, feel the emotion and observe the reaction. Don't make it personal. Simply observe the present behind the content of the mind. Be the silent observer. Another example, where this may become more apparent, is in the middle of an argument where your egoic identity has been attacked. For example, if your boss undervalues you, if you are able to notice your reaction or emotion at the very moment it appears and observe it without judgment, you will be able to regain your calm much sooner. Another clarification here, this doesn't mean accepting being attacked either physically or verbally. You can react and cut all behavior that you don't like. The difference is to do it from the identity of the mind or from the identity of the self. The former will tend to be more abrupt and even make the situation worse. The second will tend to be more effective because it is not manipulated by the conditioned mind. Fifth idea. The how is always more important than the what. Tell me if you identify with this and you can write it down in the comments. There are tasks that we don't like and become a burden. But there are others that we do like and for some reason also end up being a burden. How to solve this? Try paying much more attention to the doing than to the result, and do this every time you find yourself feeling the burden in what you do. This means using clock time. Remember, you have some plans, but you focus on what you are doing right now. Imagine your job is to climb a mountain and your big goal is to reach the peak. Mountaineers know that climbing a mountain usually takes hours, if not days. Whereas you are only at the peak for a few minutes. If you focus only on the result, you will miss the journey. If, on the other hand, you focus on the effort, it's going to make it harder. It would be like filling your backpack with unnecessary stones. When you notice a burden in what you do in your life, you can ask yourself the following question. Is there tranquility, joy, and lightness in what I do? If not, try to pay much more attention to how you are doing it. It will be like letting go of the stones in your backpack. Sixth idea. You have three options. The how you do it focuses on bringing attention to the present moment, and that's fine because we can always fall back on that. On the other hand, if you really feel uneasy or unhappy, you have three options. 1. Leave the situation. 2. Change the situation. 3. If you can or don't want to do anything, accept the situation completely. And we could add a fourth option, which would be to complain continuously, But let's be honest, by complaining, you may release stress, but you also release cortisol. Does that really benefit you? And I know this is easier said than done, but that doesn't take away from the point. If we want to take responsibility for our life, we have to choose one of these three options, and we have to do it now, and then accept the consequences without excuses or negativity. And on a personal note, I would add that nothing is forever, in the sense that now, in every moment, you have the three options available to you again. And the seventh and last idea: create the habit of returning to the present. Finally, I want to leave you with this idea: to create the habit of consciously returning to the present, to detect the habitual unconsciousness. And by this, I mean to be thinking about the past and the future. It is very difficult because it is our default way of functioning. So to come back to the present, simply create the habit of asking yourself this question: am I calm in this moment? If there is any kind of tension, notice how you avoid or resist being in the only place that exists, the now. Just a moment. Don't go yet. We have the most important thing left. If you remember, we were going to look at some concepts to answer the question, what practical sense does the power of time have in our life? Well, we have already seen them. So here is the answer. The key is to have a calmer and happier life by living in the now, as much as you can. Use the past and the future for practical matters and go back to the time whenever you can. The more, the better. Thank you all so much, and especially to those of you who have made it this far. It really is a great support for me and is what allows Ways to Success to keep going. If you haven't already, I would also greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe, turn on the bell notifications and comment. See you in the video next week. And remember, smart work is the key to success.